Hello and welcome to the first episode of Ruddle Me This. Well, it's technically episode 6, it's the 6th podcast I've done, but I've decided to do a whole rebrand, change the name, make it a bit more general. We'll get more into that later. But for now, here is part 1 of my interview with local Christchurch improviser Jeff Clark. Welcome everybody to the podcast. I am Taylor Ruddle and I like posters. I've got my second guest on today. This is episode 6, I believe. Welcome to the show, Jeff Clark. Welcome.
Hello.
I was trying to think of how to sum you up, Jeff, but you are a multi-disciplined performer. I suppose the easiest one to describe you would be that you're an improviser. Was that correct, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, that would be the best description of me. I am a performer with both feet very firmly in the improv camp, and then I sort of stretch and put my fingers in all the different sort of pies. But
I was going to say that you've got your fingers in many pies.
yeah, but generally with that comedy made up sort of off the cuff sort of style,
Yeah.
more often than not.
And you've been gigging for 20 years, was that around?
Oh,
Correct?
longer than that now.
Longer than 20 years?
Long time. Like professionally, yeah, let's say 20,
Uh-huh.
just for my own sense of mortality
Yeah,
to,
exactly. That sounds
yeah.
good.
But yeah, a long time.
And you're a Christchurch-based performer. Have you
I
ever
am.
lived abroad or in a different city whilst pursuing the comedic dream?
No, not for any prolonged period of time. The closest I'd come would be when I was 10 years old. My family lived in Canada for 6 months, but otherwise it's
Oh,
pretty much been exclusively New Zealand and Christchurch.
is that where you learned to become such a nice gentleman over in Canada?
Oh, yeah, maybe. I mean, I loved Canada. I thought it was great. It was the birthplace of improv. I think I was there just as it was sent from Canada to New Zealand, the whole theatre sports birth.
Are you like Nosferatu getting shipped over in a crate in a coffin to start
Yeah,
your improv revolution over here?
I
Oh, that's
I
really
think they
great.
just took one look at me and said, "Hey, this guy's going to need something when he gets back to New Zealand, so
True, yeah,
let's
you
give him."
can't send him alone. Like sending
Let's,
Link with the Master Sword. I suppose that's
yeah,
another thing to talk about you. You are quite into the same sort of pop culture stuff I'm into.
very much
You
so. Yeah.
Is Nerd Degree your creation of a podcast?
No, that's Brendan Bennett's. Brendan Bennett
Oh, that makes a lot of
is
sense.
the he's the one who successfully monetized slash conceptualized slash came up with some great shows that actually did it in a way that would earn some money for them, as opposed to just me, who was quite content playing D&D with my friends in a living room or uh, staying up late with too many beers talking about nerdy pop culture things.
Yeah.
So yeah, Brendan is the brains behind that stuff.
Oh, that's great. I love Brendan. I've not really properly met him, but I've seen him. We've said hello a bunch of times, so that's really cool. And I was going to say as well, do you know, a lot of nerds tend to skew one direction. Like some people are more sci-fi, some people are more fantasy, some people are more comic books. Would you say you have a particular leaning when it comes to this?
Oh, sci-fi comic books, absolutely. Both, that was my whole introduction to the whole world. Was comic books initially, Spider-Man superhero comic books. Graphic novels didn't happen for quite a long time. It was all just the monthly comic books that I collected. And sci-fi movies, always been a massive sci-fi movie fan, even since a kid. I don't recall the first time I saw Star Wars, but I've seen it so many times. Um,
Well,
so those are my main ones.
I was going to say, what has the comic book scene in Christchurch been like historically? Because the only one I can really remember is Comics Compulsion, which used to be on Manchester Street, but now is in Papua Nui. Were
No, not
they?
even there anymore.
Oh, they moved from there.
It's
Oh,
yeah,
that shows
it's
how out
not
of the
there.
game I am.
Comics Compulsion is now online only.
Ah,
There
I
is
see.
a shop at Northlands called Pop Weasel,
Yep.
but there is and again, I'm kind of out of the scene as well in
Yeah.
regards to that. But as far as I know, there isn't a dedicated. I think Pop Weasel is the only dedicated comic book shop, and that is much more on the sort of collectibles and trade paperback side of things.
Yes, I think a lot of comic book stores and kind of geeky geek merchants have had to pivot into, like, if you go into an EB Games nowadays, it
Oh yeah.
is 90% Funko Pops and
Yep.
then a little corner with games in them. And but I suppose that's just the nature of it's probably a lot easier to get introverted geeks to order things online than to actually come into a store or would have to interact with people, right?
Absolutely. And to be honest, I like the fact that EB Games has become more of a nerd culture
Yeah, I
thing
like it
as
too.
opposed to
Yeah.
just gaming sort of stuff. Like the t-shirts that you can get there are great. And the thing with like Comics Compulsion is they were comics and board games and gaming stuff. The guy who created it was very much a comic fan, and then the people who took over were very much tabletop gamers. And so it did shift
It's
in
kind
that
of like
focus.
a for
Yeah.
us by us kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say the interestingly enough, board games have almost gone through a renaissance again compared to comic books. Like you see a lot of board gaming and bar type places popping up. So I suppose
Yep.
that's encouraging. It'd be really interesting to see if comics have went through a proper renaissance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a wee while for that because comics have gone to becoming mainstream pop culture now, like
Yes,
with the
because of the
Marvel
movies, of
movies
course.
and the complete saturation that we've hit now, where it's, I think, starting to sort of ebb in terms of there's just so many and so much that people are
Yeah.
just like they can't keep up, and so you're
Hmm.
seeing the movies coming out to fair to middling reviews as opposed to the
Yes.
rave reviews they got, and some movies are now not doing very well at all, which is a real shame.
Yeah. It's been interesting to
Yeah.
see because we've been alive to see the movie revolution change. Like I think I was rewatching X-Men, I forget, is
The
it
Bryan
this?
Singer,
Yes, 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 yes.
2000. Yeah, amazing.
And what I found really interesting was at times it almost felt like I was watching an episode of The X-Files or some kind of detective show because the one scene in particular stuck out to me was when they found Nightcrawler in his church that he was like living in, and just the way it was all shot, they were in like these leather kind of trench coats, and it
Yep.
just felt like I was watching a like a noir, almost a detective thing. But now the
Yeah.
movies have got their own visual kind of language. They all look a part of a set, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. Yeah, they've had a whole heap of different things with that. It has become like there's we could have a whole talk about
Yes, this could very quickly
the superhero
degenerate.
slash comic book movie thing in
Yes.
terms of visual style and all of that, which I've always found really interesting as well as well as my sort of nerd bona fides. I have worked in arts marketing, so that's been where I got a real like I loved graphic design as a kid. I did want to be a comic book artist when I grew up, and unfortunately had a bad year with a art teacher who didn't get what I was into, so that kind of
That
stopped me there.
that is a
So I've just
shame.
been yeah, so I've just been recreationally an artist and drawer and things like that. So
Uh, so I suppose we could this segues quite nicely into your posters you brought with us.
yeah,
Let's go with the Raiders because that is the
yeah,
sort of tangential to what we're talking about. So the first poster Jeff has brought in is the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first in the Indiana Jones. What are they up to now?
absolutely.
Five, 4 or 5
Five.
movies.
Yeah, yeah, they're up
So
to five.
how old were you when you first saw Raiders?
When I first saw Raiders, I would say I was probably about 7 or 8. I wasn't I wasn't very old, but it was just such an epic thing. And like similar with Star Wars, those sort of formative early years, it was just so amazing. And as a child of the 80s as well, Drew Struzan is the guy who did all those illustrated slash
They're so good.
artistically designed ones. And so I just remember seeing that artwork. I think my family probably got it on VHS tape and
Oh,
seeing the cover on that, it just tells you everything you need to know
it really does, doesn't it?
about the movie, about the show, about what you're going to see. It's a guy with a hat and a whip and a few faces in the background. Some of them look like friendly faces, some of them look like creepy faces.
Yeah, there's a very sinister guy with a fedora sort of sitting behind him. Is he one of the Nazis? I think it's who he
Yeah,
is.
almost certainly. Yeah.
What I find quite interesting about the poster as well is the Raiders of the Lost Ark logo
Yep.
has aged quite well. That
Oh, it's
font
amazing.
And the gradient doesn't look cheesy now. What is this? 40 years later, we're talking about this now, 30,
Yeah,
40? And I was watching a little documentary about the behind the scenes of the Indiana Jones. I think it was the first one specifically.
yeah.
And they didn't have the Indiana Jones logo itself ready when they were making it, but they all had like, what is it, embroidered, um, not uniforms, but
Hats.
yeah. And
Like most films would have had hats.
yes, and so it was interesting to see that they'd come up with, well, they kind of knew it was going to be a thing when they were making it, and
Yeah,
it was very cool to see all that gear. Like I just remember seeing on the breast of a vest or something like that.
yeah, yeah.
And I think the logo has it could just be my nostalgia talking, but I think it still looks quite cool.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's lived up to that. It stood the test of time. Like it is already a timeless film. You know, it was made in the 80s. It was set in the 30s, or
Yes.
and just I mean the first one was just Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was later on that it became Indiana Jones and
Yeah. Yes.
So originally it was Raiders, and then the font that they used for Raiders became Indiana Jones, which is much bigger,
Yes.
a much longer word. And so I don't necessarily think the font is as effective if we're going to go into full, artwork or
Yeah, yeah,
design
absolutely.
nerdery.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
definitely.
even if you look at the more recent, when they rejigged it and made it
Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, it just doesn't have that same pop to it.
That is the struggle I've run into a lot is something looks great in a short word format and then you try to tweak it and it doesn't look as nice.
Oh yeah, your title is gonna be a massive challenge for any poster. And so, there are people that, it's a two if you can do a two-word show title, you're fine because it
Yeah.
can be nice and big and bold. Or most of the
Hmm.
time, once you've established as a name, it's your name
Yes.
and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is what they do now for Indiana Jones.
Yes.
That's the thing that they want people to look at. But I've been involved in some very long named shows. When I was
That,
working for a professional theatre company, obviously we had play titles that were written by people who were writers, and so they loved words, and so they
mhm.
put as many as they could. And admittedly, when I wrote a full-length play, it was over 12 words long for the show title.
There you go. So
Yeah.
when, just as a slight tangent, but this could add some context,
Yep,
you worked for a professional theatre company as the marketing manager.
I did.
How long did you do that for?
I did it for I was at the theatre for about 6 years. Then I took
Wow.
a couple of years off for burnout, and then I worked for another theatre. Oh, I worked for an arts festival after that, and then I went back to the theatre and got burnt out even quicker. So all in all, I've been involved in arts marketing and show marketing, and like specifically helping design posters for
Mhm.
around about 8 or 9 years, or almost 10 years on and off.
Yeah.
Um,
That could be a future episode as maybe Jeff's top 10 tips of what to do and what not to do on a poster.
oh yeah,
The I was going to say though, the marketing side of it feels a little. I've never worked in specifically a marketing role, but that feels like it will be quite hectic. It feels like you would be constantly. You would feel like you're putting out fires constantly. Does that feel like
yeah.
what your experience
Hence,
was?
hence me getting burnt out
Yeah.
twice. And I actually really enjoyed the festival because the festival had a very clear start and end point.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Festivals like that.
you can kind of make it a marathon and get through it. Whereas if it's just endurance running and there's no finish line and they
Yeah.
keep moving the thing back and they keep
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, wait, this," doesn't quite work the same. But the
When
process of design is good. Sorry.
No, no, sorry. I was going to say when you're marketing for, because I've heard this about thespian theaters,
Yep.
is that you have a two-play cycle. The first play will be something like Peter Pan or Allo Allo or something to get people to just stuff people have heard of that to come in and watch it. And then if that does well enough, you can do your artsier one, the second play, and you can do something that you really want to put on and play around. Was that accurate at all to your experience, or were you working on
Well,
more than that at once?
oh yeah, yeah. The theater I was working at was making around about 7 or 8 main stage shows a year, four
Wow.
or four kids shows a year, and then they opened a second venue and
Oh,
had
wow.
another 6 or 7 plays on top of that. So at its peak, I was helping them design or created visual language for almost just shy of 20 shows,
That's
different productions, different shows.
yeah.
And more realistically, it was around about 15 because a couple of them were like under a specific umbrella.
Yes.
And so you just sort of established visual language for one thread, which was the main stage. You established a second visual language for the more arty venue, and then you established one for the kids shows. So it was all
Yes.
cartoony stuff.
Yeah. I found that quite difficult to design for children because the people say they want it colorful, but I can't make it. There's a way to make it look nice, and then there's a way to make it look like just a big vomit of colors at once, and that tends to be how mine comes out the second way.
What they mean with colorful is they want strong color.
Mm.
It's if you put too many colors on a poster, it doesn't work at all.
Hmm.
Some of the most, even if you look at the Indiana Jones poster, it's very much in a sort of sepia browns and oranges and yellow. It's basically a brown, orange, and yellow poster,
Yes.
and there is hardly any deviation from that in the design. The biggest thing you'd say is his white shirt is probably the most visually striking.
Mm.
The unbuttoned white shirt, which is, of course, in the middle third,
Yeah.
which gets the attention. And then you look at the title. The title is the red, white, and yellow sort of
Gradient effect on it.
ombre, sort of gradient. But they've deliberately made it on a grey background, so it pops right out.
They've also got
So,
a very cartoony drop shadow on the title, which I always
oh,
liked. I like a good chunky drop
absolutely.
shadow. Yeah.
Yeah, I love me a good drop shadow, like or outline glow that you just set really
Yeah.
narrow and really really light.
Yeah. I've done that
Or
many a time.
yeah. And it's like so what I mean is with the use of color, you only need a couple of colors, and that makes it feel colorful.
Yes, that's
With
quite
kid
a good
shows, I'd
point.
say choose like white and maybe two primary colors, and that's all you need for a colorful poster. He
Oh,
said using air quotes.
there you go. We're learning already. This is great. This is one thing I've
Yep.
learned from talking to you and Stephen Lyons is that I really do not know what I'm talking about when it comes to design. So it's been good to absorb some knowledge from people that have been around the block and done it. One thing I've just noticed while looking at the Indiana Jones one now is they've done a really cool thing where I don't know exactly what the effect's called, but the tablet, the stone block that everything is on, you have little bits and pieces that poke out of it, like the snake off to the left, and then some vines at the top, and then a little
Yeah,
piece of the block. And that's quite interesting because it's you're making it
yeah,
all feel like a diorama almost, or
yeah,
like a pinball machine. How you have little pieces that kind of come up off it, and then
absolutely.
the rest of it is actually quite boring text. It's just like a Return
Yep.
of the Great Adventure at the top, and then all of the studio information at the bottom.
Yeah, that's what you call not that's what you call a not a full bleed poster. So
Ah,
bleed is like whether or not the image goes right over the edges of the poster,
yes.
which generally is when you've got a professionally printed poster.
Yeah.
If you've got a professionally printed poster, you need to have it going further than the edges of what it's going to get cut down to.
Hmm.
So there's some redundant imagery. Whereas the Raiders poster there's the image, and the image is on the white, and then the white is where they've got all the compulsory marketing, contractually obliged information.
It often does feel like that, doesn't it? It feels like they don't want to include it on the poster, so they just chuck
Yeah.
it in. We were talking about some Fast and the Furious ones, and some of that you couldn't
Yeah.
even read with how small
Oh,
it was.
yeah. And it's the same thing with when you're in theatre that they're contractually
Of
obligated
course.
to have. And in theatre, it's a lot more tricky because, the author's name has to be at least 50% most of the time of the title of the
Really?
play. Yep,
Wow.
absolutely. And if it's a really long play, then
Yeah.
that's going to be really hard. But also, if it's like something like Cats, you can make Cats massive. But then you've also, like, you could make Cats in like 100-point font.
Yeah.
But then you'd have to make Andrew Lloyd Webber in 50-point font.
Oh, that is
And
really
that would be
fascinating.
a nightmare
Yeah.
because it's way more letters.
Cats is only four letters.
Um,
Yeah. It's like a critical
exactly.
mass of the perfect amount of letters.
Absolutely.
I think Raiders
Yeah.
is good. What
And
is it? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Seven's a good number for a title, I think.
yeah, Raiders of the
Yeah.
Lost Ark, you know?
I was going to say as well, I've noticed this with authors when they become more notorious might be a weird word there, when they become more famous, eventually the title becomes the tiny thing
Yep.
on the cover. Would you ever have that with a play? Would an author ever be bigger than the play, as it were? Like, I guess, would people be coming out because they would
Yes.
see maybe Shakespeare, I think you could do that with, but
Oh, no. New Zealand, it's Roger Hall. Roger
Yeah.
Hall. If you
And
put
then
Roger Hall on a New Zealand theatre poster, you've basically guaranteed 2 or 3 arty plays for that
gotcha.
season. And
So
sort of to answer your earlier question, actually,
yes, yeah.
most theatre companies, yeah, there's the popular shows, and that will fund the arty ones, and so
Hmm.
you needed to get bums on seats for that. So when you're doing like juggling like 7 main stage shows, you can guarantee that 3 of them will be considered popular. He said,
Yeah.
using air quotes again. If there's one Roger Hall, that would have guaranteed a couple of other ones.
Oh, that's
Um,
brilliant.
but yeah, so basically it would be balanced, and that's the challenge of any programming for a main stage theatre, is that you have to mix the artistically valid with the generally popular. And if you can get both, even better.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
more often than not, you are going to have to sort of walk that tightrope and balance both sides.
I find the economics of running a theatre fascinating, so I enjoy
There
talking
aren't
about
any.
this kind
It's insane.
of so they were just
Yeah.
figuring out as they go.
Yeah.
So I guess we could talk about the content of the Indiana Jones a little bit and why it's meaningful to you. I was there one scene that grabbed you in particular, or was it the whole vibe of the movie that you just really enjoyed? Is it a comforting watch to you? What makes it special to you?
It's an adventure. I think it was just really adventurous and fun. And for someone who has grown up to love storytelling and stuff like that, it doesn't really have a very deep story. Like they've made the argument that Indiana Jones could be removed from the plot and it would happen exactly the same. The Nazis get the Ark, they take it, they open it, it kills everyone
You're right,
except
yeah.
Indiana Jones. Like
Yeah.
that's the classic gag of it, is that his presence isn't really that, but he's kind of the character who ends up doing these things. But it was just super fun. It's a great wish fulfillment sort of thing for a young asthmatic 8, 9 year old guy going out and making archaeology look cool. Sweet, that was great. And this is on the heels of things like Star Wars. I chose the Raiders of the Lost Ark poster just because I know the poster for that one more than I do the Star Wars poster. Like Star Wars for me is just the big text of Star Wars appearing on a screen with that fanfare. That's the image I have when I think of Star Wars. It wasn't so much the posters that got me there; it was just the show. Whereas Raiders of the Lost Ark, I knew I was in for a good time when I saw that.
The that original Star Wars poster with Luke, where he has that gigantic cross-shaped
Yep,
lightsaber, I think
yep.
that is a really cool. I mean, it's nothing like the movie, but I think that's a really cool poster. Just that artwork of him, and I believe they also did this bleedless look, didn't they? Because they had. I should bring that up so that I can know what I'm talking about now. But because
Like the
like
original design with like the eye of with it being the eye of Darth Vader. That's the one you're talking about,
yes,
right?
I think I am. I'm just going to bring it up
And there's
now.
Princess Leia with like it's like the cover of a fantasy novel,
Yes.
and you've got like all the ships heading towards the Death Star on one side, and yeah, I've got it here. I've got it here. Um, yeah, amazing, right? But
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
and he's
I've
got
got
his
it up.
chest exposed and
Yeah,
everything like
they're
that.
both
And you
very
got
sexy compared to how they were
they're
in the movies, aren't they?
they're way too sexy. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean,
Something about the way that that cross cuts through the rest of the poster always I thought was really cool. And
yeah,
it's not like how the lightsabers were. And then
yep.
interestingly enough, I'm just noticing the logo was tiny in that poster. It's
And
just off to the
it's not
corner.
the logo. It's not the logo that it ended up being.
No, yeah, you're right.
There's
They've
that the iconic yellow outlined interlinked
yeah.
lettering.
I
That
don't
was
mind that logo though. But
yeah,
anyways, let's get back to Indy because
sure.
this will become another Star. We could always do a Star Wars one later on, but I
Yeah,
think I really know what you mean about it just seeming like fun. I think
yeah,
we've all had that kind of fantasy of discovering a Temple of Doom, I suppose, kind of thing, and finding treasure or something like that. It's all
yeah,
quite like you say, wish fulfillment. I think is the best way to put that.
yeah.
And I think it's very easy to play Indiana Jones when you're just in your garden running around
Oh
and
yeah,
using
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah. It's much
imagination.
easier. You don't have to have a spaceship and all of that. You'd have to sort of coat your room with like egg cartons and paint it white, and then you for it to be a realistic sort of Death Star set.
That's true. There's also something about the sets in Raiders that I think like it looks fake, but not in a phony way. Like it sounds weird, but they're kind of they're a safe danger. Like
Yeah, I mean,
The
they were going for the matinee serial feel for it.
Yes, I can't remember what the original they were. I heard them described as a pastiche of a vibe of these Doctor Adventure or something. I think was the other movie that they were sort of
Oh
pastiching
yeah, yeah, yeah,
slightly.
yeah.
That idea of traipsing is the word, traipsing through the
Yeah, yeah,
jungle with a machete, cutting down vines, and you've
yeah.
got the guy behind you looking scared, reading through a book, and
Yep.
all that kind of fun stuff, snakes and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And is there anything else you can think of you'd like to talk about Raiders, about anything
Oh
just
no,
that you've been thinking about?
those first three movies are great. They're just
Yes.
really, really good. And the fact that the second movie was a prequel and then the third one was the sequel,
Yeah. They're
that
just
was
going for
that was
the
cool.
we're gonna do what we want kind of order of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, just jumping around. It's very
The
cool.
I'm trying to get my ordering correct because it's been a while since I've watched them. The second one was Temple of Doom, which is
Temple
where
of
he
Doom,
has I should have researched his name. The his little sidekick,
Short Round.
Short Round, who just won an Oscar for
Yes.
uh,
Everything Everywhere All at
that's the
Once.
one, yeah, which awesome. I
So
thought he
good.
was great in that. His you've seen it presumably.
Yes, I have multiple
His
times. It's such a
his
good film.
his Jackie Chan kind of scene where he I forget the exact combination of things he had to do, but he had to do something with bubblegum and then he turned
Yep,
something into nunchucks and just had
yep.
that awesome fight scene. That was so
It
cool.
was spectacular.
Yeah, but how good for him that he sort of that was a massive gap. 20 years or something. He's been
30 years.
30 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Because he was really funny in that second one, wasn't he?
Oh, he was great. He was a
Yeah.
great character.
He's I like that dynamic. The Rock often does this dynamic quite well, where the adult character is almost outwitted by the child quite
Yep,
often.
yep.
And yeah, just really funny. Indy
Yeah.
Indiana Jones does a he's not a dumb person, but he is a bit of a lunkhead at times. And I
Oh
think
yeah,
that
he gets the snot beaten out of him pretty much at every turn.
he
Like he
does.
fails 80% of the time.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like a great fighter when you see him, yeah, like you say, getting the snot beaten out of him
Yeah.
in most of his movies. But that was something that I think, speaking of Jackie Chan, that was a thing that he
Yep.
put into his films is that he would very rarely be, he was fighting his way up from the bottom rather than the other way
Exactly.
around.
Yeah, yeah. And sort of putting a little twist on the modern movie over it. Now we have superstars like, The Rock and things like that who have contracts about they
Hmm.
can't lose fights. They have to
Yes.
win all their fights.
We
And
literally did speak about this on
yeah,
the Stephen Lyons podcast.
yeah, and we have movies where, the linking back now to the superhero movies, we know that superheroes have got like five more movies coming soon with those characters, so we know to
Yeah.
think there are no stakes.
Yes, and then even with things like Multiverse, that brings
Yep,
a whole nother because I feel like the movies have finally caught up to the comics in terms of multiverse stuff. Like they had,
yep,
yeah, like you say, very low stakes, and
yeah,
even I'm not sure if you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z, but they recently, within the last 5 years, just crossed into there are multiple universes with different characters that are sort of versions of the main cast, but just different. And I think I think the longer a series goes on, it is an inevitability that they'll eventually kind of reach that point of, well, we have to do a multiverse now.
yeah,
Well, maybe not have to, but they seem to all end up in
yeah,
the same area like that.
yeah.
Do you think Star Wars will ever end up there?
I think it did.
Ah,
I
okay.
think it did. I think it really did. I mean, you look at the one-two punch of Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker in the
Mm,
films, and both films incredibly divisive and polarizing for
they
the
were, weren't
fandom.
they?
And I'm not going to take sides because I don't want to invite a massive storm upon myself.
You don't want that smoke, no.
But I will say that the problems with those two films were the result of what happened in the first sequel.
First sequel
I
being Ray's first film?
The Force Awakens.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I think that the seeds were sown there because it didn't. It said, here are stormtroopers again. Here's a Death Star again.
Yeah.
Here's someone with on a sandy planet with powers again. And I know that they like the recycling and the echoes and the poetry thing
They
that George
do.
Lucas said in the prequels, but it wasn't by George Lucas. This was a chant, and so the it oversaturated it, and so now we've got as many Star Wars films being announced and then cancelled as we do actually making it to the screen.
Ah,
And in this
yes.
case, we've had less Star Wars making it to the big screen. We've got multiple TV shows, some of which are artistically valid and some of which are entertaining, sometimes both. But it is that sort of it is the problem with pop culture now is that it has become this massive behemoth of a thing that is essentially eating itself in terms of there's no room for anything else to grow, but the creature itself is so overfed that it can't move or be nimble or do the stuff that it needs to do.
Mm. That's why I've gotten quite into reading the lesser comics.
Yep.
Kind of like I've gotten really into Dark Horse and Image lately. Like I've been a huge
Yeah.
Hellboy fan for years, but
Yeah.
I've just read through East of West. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one.
No.
That is an Image Comics one. Very good little series. It is probably a bit long. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a short comic, but it
Yep.
was really good, really cool artwork.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, I think even the movie industry's been a bit like this, where, when was the last time you saw like a new idea for a movie to become a franchise? Like I guess you could say John Wick was one of
Yep.
them, perhaps.
Yep.
But otherwise, it's just a lot of the same kind of being re-rolled, isn't it?
I would say there's nothing really that's come out in the last few years that has been significantly bold or original. And and I mean, the problem is it's that the audiences like what they know. They like the feeling of familiarity and stuff like that.
Mm,
But at the same time, you have to give them, so it has to give them something new. Otherwise, it's just they won't realize it. But
yeah,
it's not going to give them what they need.
yeah. I think one thing that I saw articulated quite well is because I'm like big into movies like Murder on the Orient Express and
Yep.
that kind of Agatha Christie murder mystery.
Yep.
Like also obviously I love Knives Out and
Oh yeah, Glass Onion.
Glass Onion and the author Ryan Johnston, I think it is,
Right.
Johnston.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said that Agatha Christie became at some point people just wanting her to tell them the same story but a different way.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yes, I think that's kind of what you're talking about there with
Yep.
people the Star Wars thing. The same elements, but just mix it up a little bit and give us
Yeah,
a different spin on it.
exactly. And Ryan Johnson wrote and directed Last Jedi. And
It's for
did
real.
what? Yeah, yeah. And which was massively polarizing because he subverted it. He tried to subvert expectations and be
Yeah,
surprising and be bold. And it was incredibly polarizing because you have these people that think they want more of the same
yeah,
and they don't get what they want and they get really, really angry. And then you have other people that go, "Oh, this is amazing. I got something I wasn't expecting and it was delightful." And so you've got two groups of people that saw the same thing but had completely different experience because they went into it with completely different expectations.
that's a big one. The expectations, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they making a new Indiana Jones, a fifth one?
Yes, they are.
Have they released any information about what it's kind of going to be
Yeah,
about?
there's a trailer for it and everything. It's the Dial of Destiny.
Wow. Okay. There's more about it
And
than I thought there would be.
it jumps around in time. I think they do a lot of digital de-aged Harrison Ford, which
Okay. That
uh,
could be interesting.
uh,
Yeah.
and Shia LaBeouf is nowhere to be seen. And
What
it's
was his
got
character called? Mutt, was it?
Mutt, yep,
Yeah.
and it's got Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I believe, as the goddaughter who's with Indiana Jones.
Oh, goddaughter is for some reason I was thinking like God, like as in God King, like Xerxes from
Oh,
300.
right. Yeah,
The
the
goddaughter.
goddaughter.
Yeah, this
No,
is the.
like literally, the daughter of one of his friends.
I'm with you now. Yeah. Okay, well I'll probably still check it out because
Oh,
I've
I mean, everyone
mellowed.
will, but
Yeah, you're right there. I've
that's
mellowed
why
on
they
the
do it.
I've mellowed on the alien ones as
Yep.
more time has gone past. Like I didn't really mind Shia LaBeouf's character. I thought he was interesting.
I thought it was okay. It's just, what is it?
Yeah, it was one of
What
those
is it?
things where you sort of thought, did they
Yeah.
need to make another one? But
Yeah.
I don't know. I fear that Indiana Jones is going to be one of those ones that we want them to stop making movies long before they stopped making movies about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, they've already almost got the technology to have a digital Harrison Ford making movies
You're not wrong. That
forever.
yes, we had a big conversation about our actors going to have to start signing their rights to
Yep,
their likeness to be like Paul Walker in Fast
yep,
and the Furious. I'm sure he would have been fine with it, but
yep.
you've got actors from Star Wars like what was he called? He was one of Vader's like lieutenants, and they recreated him digitally in
Oh, Moff Tarkin
yes, yeah, Moff
in
Tarkin.
Rogue One.
That's another one where I'm sure he would have been fine with it,
Yeah,
but
well,
you got to wonder at what point do you go like, all right, come on, enough. Like
yeah.
there's been 7 movies where you used me, just recast me.
Actors will be created by, it'll be written by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It'll be
Yeah.
virtual actors who've signed away their likeness and stuff. Like Darth Vader's voice, James Earl Jones has signed over the voice for Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're already more than halfway there.
It's come up quickly, hasn't it?
Yep,
So I think that's probably about 20 minutes on that. Shall we
that's
move
a
on to
sizable chunk.
some of
Yeah,
your I got to say the conversation is flowing a lot better than I was expecting it to, so this is quite good.
I get that a
Shall
lot.
we- So we'll move on to
Sure thing.
some of your personal ones. So the first one I think we'll look at is present, which I've got in front of me now
Yep,
as the
that
three.
is the most recent poster that I designed, I think,
When
there,
did you that was
chronologically.
June last year, was it?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was. Yeah, it would have been last year.
So to the audio only listeners, what Jeff has done here, you designed this, I presume?
I did, yes.
So what Jeff has done is he's created 3 versions of the poster that are subtly a little bit different with just a different photo of himself and Laura Irish, who was his
Yeah,
co-improviser. It's an improv show, wasn't it?
co-performer. Yes, it was an improv show.
So what just made you decide to create 3 different variants of the poster?
I like I like threes. I like I I just love posters or material that links together somehow that doesn't do the same thing every time. I think it's more interesting. And also I can't decide on what one I like the most, so a chance to sort of be indecisive and go, actually, let's make all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, from a design and print version point of view, flyers, if you've got a DLE flyer, that's 1/3 of an A4 sheet. So you can quite easily create 3 flyers,
Yep.
3 different flyers
Hmm.
really easily, because for a printer, it's just the same thing on a chunk of paper that they
Yeah.
chop up. And it's also the same but different each time.
Yeah.
Like when they see the poster, it's visually the style for it is all the colors being blasted out except for cyan and magenta.
That's how you
It's
did it.
black and white, and then you can see I'm wearing a black shirt, Laura's wearing a black shirt, but I'm holding a blue present and she's holding a pink present, and then the text is in purple, which is 50% cyan and 50% magenta,
Yep. Very
um,
thematic.
and at different intensities. So I used all the print tricks for that
Yeah.
one.
You would
But
have really
again,
been cutting costs if we were printing on a what do you call it? One of those old school rollers
if
with
you were
the
on the old school rollers, but
you
nothing's
could
on an old school or any
no, you
roller
could have done
anymore.
away
Like
with the yellow completely.
there
Would
was
have
no saving. Yeah, there's no saving. It was if you'd been on an old school printing, it would have worked great.
it's like
But
when you
it's also
do oh, go ahead,
yeah.
sorry.
No. After you.
When you do pixel art, except you put more than 256 colors in it, and it's like technically yes, it's pixel art, but that wouldn't work on the system that you're emulating. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Well, basically, it's just I it's that whole colorful idea.
Yes.
2 colors and black. 2 colors and black. That's what it is. It's blue and it's pink and it's black and white.
It's
Well,
also
white, I'm
on
thinking is a color, and it's
yeah.
on a white background. It's all clear cut,
That to me
and
is very scary to have a poster with a lot of white space. That's my sort of designer toxic trait is I am afraid of white. So that
I
sounds
love
weirdly
it.
racial, but yeah, it's
I love negative space is the way to
yeah, there you go.
describe it without wading into awkward territory. Just
Yes.
negative space,
Yeah.
space for with nothing on it, and that could be an all white background. It could be an all black background. If you're obviously wanting it to be a printed poster, white is going to be the most cost effective option,
This is
or
true.
ink, kind to your
Busting the
ink printer.
recession. Yeah.
Yep. Um, and it means that the title just pops really
Yeah.
nicely. It's
Yeah.
called present, and that's the thing that you see. And then you see people holding presents, and you go, oh, it's because, there's a little joke in the title. It's called Jeff Clark and Laura Irish Present,
Yeah.
or Present.
Present. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like multiple interpretations of things.
Yeah, no,
So
that's you've done a lot of work, and
yeah,
that's I'm kind of glad we get to showcase this to people now. I hope people appreciate it. I was
yeah,
going to say, when you perform a two-person improv show, like I've been to see Scriptless a few times, which is with
yeah,
four people, which for the listeners not familiar with it, easiest way to describe it is a bit like Whose Line?
yeah.
When you do it with two people, what does the format look like when you do the show?
It's much the same because I mean, when you're doing a show like Scriptless or Whose Line, you look at the scenes that they do, and normally it's about two performers in each scene. Anyway, it's
That's
just in
true.
this version, in the version of Present, no one got a rest. It was just we were there for the whole hour, just listening to each other and reacting to each other's ideas and making up stories, with the concept that the only rule was that at the start of the show, every story would start with someone giving the other character a present.
There you go. That's the tie into the title.
Yeah.
That's really
So it
clever.
could be an anniversary present or a birthday present or a free gift with purchase or something like that. Although we never
Gotcha.
did free gift with purchase. That would have been a nice way of doing it.
Yeah,
But it was always characters. It was basically, I'm giving you this gift, and how the gift was given and how it was received immediately lays the groundwork for what that story could be about.
gotcha. And would you take a suggestion from the audience as to what it would be? You were just kind of coming up with it.
We would we would normally have a little bit of a chat to the audience at the start about their best or worst presents they've received,
Yeah,
and that would often weave its way in.
yeah,
But for the most part, it was just let's start by giving each other something because the whole idea it grew out of a warm-up game or not even
yeah,
warm-up game, and a sort of warm-up exercise that doesn't normally make it onto stage, which is
yeah,
called the present game,
yeah.
which is about I'll give you an object. I just mime a specific size and weight
Hmm.
as vaguely as possible, and then the other person names what it is, and then that's what it is. And then the
Yeah,
person who was giving it adds a feature to it. And so it's sort of that one, two, three shape, name, detail,
yeah,
and then you just do it again, and you do it again, and it just is setting up the game of tennis. But what I wanted to do was just keep it going.
yeah,
So, give them an object, they'd name it, I'd give it a special feature, they'd have an emotional reaction, I'd say why they're having an emotional reaction, and then they'd do the same to me. And so it grew, and it was just a little thought experiment that
yeah.
that worked out to be a really fun show to do.
How long would your typical scene be in that kind of show?
Well, the thing is, they all sort of came back. It became sort of interweaving threads.
Yes.
So we'd have sort of our establishing scenes, which would be about 3 or 4 minutes, I'd
Hmm.
say, at least. And then we'd sort of move on to the next one, and
Yeah,
that might be another 3 or 4, and then we'd do one that might only be a minute, and it might not come back. It would just be a little gag, silly scene
yeah.
that sort of acts as a little sorbet or palate
Oh, so you,
cleanser.
you do need to have those in improv shows as well, a little palate cleanser.
Um, I wouldn't say you have to. I think it's just that it's fun to do that because you're like, okay, well, let's do something silly now because we've done a lot of sort of serious character work. Let's do something else completely
Yeah,
tonally different. Because again, if you're giving people the same sort of thing for the whole show, it can it can wear on them. I mean, it's the weird thing, isn't it? It's improv, so they know what they're going to get, and if it's good, you go to a movie and people are happy to sit for 2 hours with the same sort of theme and feel of a show. But
yeah,
with improv, like there's two, like it's a long form improv show as opposed to a short form. So short form, you want to have as much variation in tone and speed and style and length. Whereas in this show, it was a bit more deliberate, but we would still put in these little flights of fancy just because that's the sort of people we are as performers. We like the little silly bits as well.
yeah. I've found that I've been doing a lot of one-liner stuff lately, and
Yep.
sometimes you feel like you just need a really stupid one in there.
Oh yeah,
Like it can't be all clever wordplay stuff. Sometimes you just need a
absolutely.
weird little. Like I've got one that the punchline is poultrygeist, and you can imagine what that is, a chicken
Nice.
ghost.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, that's great.
yeah,
Do they get
so
an exorcist?
Oh, that's quite. I might have that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries. Help yourself.
Wonderful.
I love puns. Like my stand-up is very much, but again, it's sort of you have the little silly one-liners, but you also have the longer narratives, and you have the,
Hmm.
like that's how you craft a long set or a show,
Hmm. Yeah.
like a stand-up comedy show. It's not just one-liner, 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 one-liner for an hour or
Yeah.
45 minutes, however length it is,
Hmm.
because it's not sustainable for
No.
anyone involved.
Diminishing returns sets in at
Yeah,
about 7 minutes. Apparently, I've been
exactly,
told
exactly.
7.
And
Yeah.
so you wander off and tell a story and then come back and
Yeah. Yeah. You have to reset that.
yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk? Do you have a favorite of the three posters? Like I quite like the one where you're listening to the present, almost like you're listening to a.
Yeah.
I feel like you're holding it a little bit like a baby for some reason.
Yeah, that's my favorite one as well because it's the mystery box.
Yeah.
I just like the fact that it's got like visually it's got a bit more bounce to the eye. Like,
Yeah.
your eyes start in the top left corner most of the time and then it bounces down to the blue and then back to the pink because those are the sort of key
True.
visual
The eyeline is very good
visual
with that one, actually.
yeah, and so it sort of bounces. It has a nice sort of playful feel to it,
Yeah.
as opposed to the other two, which are more sort of presentery. There's less of a
Yeah.
story in those.
Yeah. I think that's my favorite too. And then I think you've got the tagline changes a little bit as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. But that's again because I just can't decide on a blurb.
Yeah. Did you have any people notice that you had different flyers when you were barking for them or anything?
Nah,
I
no.
found that we're
I mean,
often.
that's the thing. Like with most marketing material for a thing, you need to have three. You need to have at least three points of contact
Mhm.
before it sort of turns it into a maybe I'll go and see that.
Yeah, I've heard that
And
too.
yeah, and so most of the time they do that by just putting the same image everywhere and it goes great. Whereas in my
Yeah.
case, it was just the same text
Yeah.
present. And it's like slightly different to get a little bit more attention.
Yeah, you would definitely think that they were the same show though, which is good. That's
Yeah,
a success there.
yeah,
Is it the kind of thing you think you'll put on again, or if you were going to do
yes,
another two-person show, would you come up with
yep.
a new title?
I would probably do it again. I'm quite keen to pitch it to Little Andromeda where I did it last
Hmm.
time. I'd love to do it again if they are still going.
Hmm.
They're still they're having, it's not a great time for arts organizations
Yeah.
at the moment. So it would be lovely if they do come back and then I could do it again. And
Yeah.
I'd probably do it with different people each night. So it would just be Jeff
Mm,
Clark presents,
nice.
because then it's
Jeff.
Jeff Clark presents.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
the good thing is I don't have the compulsory thing of having my own name 50% of the title of the show.
That'll make it a little bit easier for you there, yeah. But I mean,
Yeah,
present is 7 letters, so that's a good number for
it's
titles.
it's nice and visually easy. You've
The
got the
magic
middle letter right in
seven.
the middle of right in the middle of the poster.
That's true. And you haven't got any letters like M, which can be a little
Yeah.
bit of a maverick when it comes to spacing out titles.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, that's really great. I like that quite a lot. So the listeners can keep an eye out for Jeff Clark Presents. Alrighty, this is Present Day Taylor again. Like I said at the start, that was part 1 of my interview with Jeff Clark. There's some really insightful pieces of information about Jeff's history doing marketing for a theatre, as well as a whole bunch of geeky digressions, for lack of a better word. I suppose that's what's going to happen when you put two geeks into a room together. We're going to go off on a lot of tangents. It was really enjoyable talking to Jeff. I didn't think we were going to click quite as much as we did, but it was a pleasant surprise to see how easily the conversation flowed. I've got the second half of that interview releasing next week on Wednesday at 11:30 New Zealand time. And in that interview we do a real deep dive on his Gary Starlight character. I was able to ask so many questions that I've had for the entire time that I've known Jeff. We also do a lot of multiverse talk, talking about his show Infinite Jeff and just the general idea of mold-breaking stand-up comedy sets and things of that nature. And then at the end he gave me a little bit of feedback on my first ever comedy poster. He was very gentle and he gave me some good advice. Right towards the end of that interview as well, you will see him basically decide the name for the podcast. I honestly thought I was going to be calling this the Rudcast, but Jeff made a pretty good argument for the name Ruddle Me This, and over the couple of weeks since we recorded that interview, the name really grew on me, and here we are with the current title of the show, thanks to Jeff. I'm hoping he's not going to expect some kind of a commission payment on that. I'll have a little bit of an update in terms of my life and what's going on for me at the end of next week's podcast. There's been quite a few changes, definitely positive ones. I am really looking forward to the next 6 months of life and to see what kind of exciting things I get up to. Just a little teaser there, so check back next week if you want to hear the second part of the interview, as well as what's going on in my life. But until then, thank you so much for listening. I will catch you next week.